A viewer recently asked how to do an RPA, a purchase agreement, with a trust and how a trustee should sign. Now, I recently did a tutorial on the residential purchase agreement for 2024. Now, even though you might see these revision numbers up here, like 1222 or 1223, it doesn't mean that CAR isn't making small changes in the meantime. They are. That's why I did a 2024 tutorial, because there have been several small changes made since last year. But now we'll talk specifically about how to write an offer if the buyer is a trust, or even if the seller's a trust. And I'll show you, because this is pretty easy once you get a hang of it. So keep in mind, whether it's a trust or any sort of entity, and when I say entity, I mean an LLC or a corporation. Trust is the same idea. It's an entity. You'll put the name of the trust as the buyer. So I wrote in what a typical trust name looks like. And of course, if it was a corporation or LLC, you'd put the company name up here. You don't put the name of the signer. All right. And then you skip down here to the very last page of the purchase agreement. That's somewhere down here. All right. And there's this handy little section now for entity buyers. That means trust, LLC. That means corporation. And so we check this box. Now, a common mistake I see is people write the name of the buyer, and then it'll automatically load into DocuSign as the entity name and not an individual's name. I want to be clear. An individual must sign. A person must sign. And the person must sign their name. That's the authorized signer. So you're going to check this box, entity buyer, and you're going to write the name of the legally authorized signer. So we're pretending Jane Smith is the trustee. So we write Jane Smith here. Again, name of the buyer's entity. Name of the authorized signer is an individual person's name, and then that person's title, it's the trustee. And then Jane Smith will sign Jane Smith right here. Now, what I was saying about DocuSign earlier is that sometimes people load this into DocuSign directly, and DocuSign automatically populates the name of the buyer here. And so when it's sent out and Jane Smith goes to sign, it appears as a signature, so like a cursive version of Smith Family Living Trust or ABC Incorporated or whatever the name is. And that's wrong. That's not a real signature. The signature needs to be the individual's name. So if you're loading it into DocuSign, you need to make that change manually. You need to go in and you need to delete what automatically populates and write in Jane Smith, and then her name will show up there as a trustee. Now, this is all you need to do if it's an entity buyer, okay? But sometimes this isn't enough because you might be doing a different form, or you might be representing the seller. So there's these two other forms that I want to bring up. Now, before this whole entity section existed, this is what you had to add on to a purchase agreement. But now that this purchase agreement has this entity section, you don't need to worry about these forms unless it's a special case. Now, we have the representative capacity signature disclosure, and there are two versions, one with the B for buyer and one with an S for seller. So let's say for whatever reason you had to do this form separately. Maybe you forgot to do one for the buyer when you wrote the offer, or the buyer, maybe Jane Smith said, hey, write an offer for me. Then a day later, or after it's accepted, she says, oh, by the way, I'm buying it in my trust. Usually sellers are selling out of a trust because a trust buyer is a cash buyer, and that's less common. So usually the seller is a trust. When the seller is a trust, you're going to use this form. When the buyer's a trust, like what I was just saying, where let's say Jane didn't tell you until after you wrote the offer, you'll use this form. This is just basically an expanded version of this section that is indicating who the authorized signer is. So by default, this automatically attaches to a purchase agreement. Now, it also shows you can check the box buyer representation agreement or an assignment, addendum, or anything else. But then you'll put the property address, and you'll put, so for this one, where this is for the buyer, I just put owner of record for the seller. Automatically, it asks who the seller is. And then I put the name of the trust. Remember, the name of the entity or trust is the buyer name, not the individual's name. I wrote again, what's the name of the trust? I wrote it right here. Then I scroll down here and it asks, who is the authorized signer, and I put Jane Smith, trustee. Now this could be an LLC, this could be a corporation. You just check the box, corporation or LLC. They even ask, is it an estate? Is it a power of attorney? Either way, you're putting the name of the authorized signer, which could be a corporate officer, it could be a member or a manager if it's an LLC, it could be someone that has a written power of attorney, and it could be maybe an executor of an estate, something like that. Anyway, so you're putting the individual's name, their title, and then they're signing. That's it. That's really all this is. Same idea here. We don't have to go through it again. The idea is that basically you're identifying the individual that's authorized to sign on behalf of the entity. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. Thank you for watching.